Hello, everybody. You've tuned into the Indiana State Police Roadshow, brought to you by the Indiana State Police Alliance, Cops for Kids, a subsidiary of the Indiana State Police Alliance. We want to thank them for their continued support of the Indiana State Police Roadshow. My friend Tom Trial, behind the scenes, waving at me, putting us on YouTube each and every week. So make sure you go to our YouTube site, Indiana State Police, and watch all the road shows there. And you can also see the other films that Tom has placed on there from days of old and new stuff that he's also putting out there each and every week. Got a new guest with me this week. We're continuing with our probation series. Got Jeff Faudree. Jeff, thank you for coming in with us today.
You're welcome.
I appreciate you being here. Jeff is the juvenile intake officer for Morgan County Probation. And so a little bit of background on Jeff. How did you get involved with Morgan County Probation, Jeff?
Was finishing my degree at Indiana University, and a part-time position came open as a home detention officer.
Okay.
I accepted that position. Within about 6 months, a full-time position came open, juvenile intake officer, and accepted that. It'll be 20 years in April.
I was going to say, I was talking earlier to names escape me right now. My last guest, Eric, from your department also, and he said he thought he'd do it maybe a year or two, and it's been 9 years now. So
yes.
Was that kind of the same road that you went down, or?
Somewhat,
yeah.
Somewhat. I actually had another job lined up when I accepted this position, was out of state doing something totally unrelated.
So are you a Morgan County native? Did you grow up in Morgan County?
I did not. I actually grew up in Hendricks and Marion County, and my family relocated to the Morgan County area about 87, 88 time frame. Graduated from Martinsville High School. Okay. Joined the military, was on a submarine for 4.5 years.
Wow.
Got accepted to Indiana University in Bloomington, came back, never left.
Well, thank you for your service also.
Well, thank you.
Appreciate it very much. And especially being on a submarine, I couldn't do that. I don't know how you did that. Very claustrophobic. I couldn't do that. Could you do that, Tom? Mm-hmm. Oh, Tom says he could do that. All right. Well, I guess I'm the only chicken here. But let's get back into what we're talking about. Juvenile probation. So what's the role of a juvenile probation? What exactly does that entail?
Well, my specific position is as a juvenile intake officer. I have several duties, but one main duty, and that's to help the prosecutor's office review all new referrals that are made by law enforcement or schools. So I actually review new cases and help make determination as to what direction those cases go, whether they go formally to court or whether we defer them in some other fashion, or even refer those on to another agency like Department of Child Services.
So do you have a direct say in that then? I mean, before something happens, you're able to review that and say, well, this is not so bad, or this is really bad, we need to go this direction?
I do. So basically what happens, law enforcement officer in our county makes an investigation. They make a determination at that department whether or not they file a case with the prosecuting attorney's office. Once the prosecutor reviews the facts and circumstances, if they decide to move forward with prosecution, then they send the case to us for evaluation and review.
Okay.
And I would say we basically have a 50-50 vote on what happens to all juvenile cases in Morgan County.
So if it's not something that's not, which ways can it go? What's the different ways that it can happen to it?
So they can go several different directions. One direction, of course, is filing those formal in court. So we take high and moderate risk offenders, generally file those types of cases formal.
Formal, you mean by there's actual court proceedings?
Yes. And those would be cases like burglary, drug-related offenses, violent crimes, but generally not first-time shoplifting, first-time drinking alcohol, incorrigibility, runaway. We generally try to deal with those types of cases outside of a courtroom.
Okay.
So then the other direction we can go, if we do not send the cases formal to court, we can offer deferral programs, a program called Informal Adjustment. Some people refer to it as informal probation order, where the judge signs off on the agreement we make with the child and his family, but the child never appears in court. So the child escapes a formal court record. Also, the cost involved with that is substantially lower if we handle that outside of court. And on low-risk offenders, we get to the same means whether we go to court or stay out of court. So it's really beneficial to the family. It also is beneficial to the court system. It helps really get the cases in the court that need to be heard, giving the judge more time to hear serious cases.
So what population are we talking about here? What ages?
We serve primarily ages 12 to 17. Of course, we might serve an 18 or 19-year-old that would have committed an offense when they were 17. On occasion, we've had children younger than 12, but those would be really serious crimes. We had a manslaughter charge one time, and we've had some burglaries and things like that involving youngsters. So I think the youngest we've ever dealt with has been a 9-year-old.
So if they're dealt with criminally, if they have to go through the court system, do you work with the parents as that goes through, or you're not brought on board until afterwards?
I work from the very beginning. So really, after law enforcement, the arrest or the interview, I'm the first guy they see in the court system.
Okay.
So I'm really with the family all the way up to the point of the judge making a decision if they're going to be placed on probation or placed in residential placement. Worst case scenario, Department of Correction. Obviously, if we defer the program or place them on a program of informal adjustment, then I'm with them until I assign them to another probation officer. We have a total of 3 juvenile probation officers in Morgan County.
So you're in charge of the probation officer?
I am the team lead for the probation department, yes.
Okay. So once you assign them to somebody else, then they stay with them through their entire probation period then?
Yes.
Okay. So what time frame are you talking about here? Is there a medium time frame, or how often is that? How long are they generally on that?
So when a juvenile is charged in an offense, we try to get the child and family in within a 2-week to 3-week period after receiving that case.
Okay.
Depending on what direction we go, if they go to court, then that could be anywhere from a month to 3 or 4 month process, depending if they admit or deny the allegations. If we put them on an informal adjustment or defer the program, it really begins at our first meeting. Kids typically spend anywhere from 4 months to a year on probation under a normal circumstance. More serious offenses, it would be a formal case filing where they would actually have to go in front of the judge, might spend 9 months to 2 years on probation.
Do they typically stay in school while this is going on, or do they not?
They do. So in Indiana, if you're under 18, it's a requirement that you attend school. If you've been expelled for some reason, then the court normally requires a family to be engaged in some form of education, or a child to be engaged in some form of education. So if they're expelled from school, it may be limited, but we may require them to do some sort of online schooling or a private school, depending on what the circumstances are.
So how often are Morgan County youth detained? How often does that happen?
Generally speaking, one of the job duties I have is crisis intervention, and I make all the detention decisions when the court's closed, so after hours and on the weekends. We typically detain probably 8 or 9 children a year because they've been involved in a really serious offense. They're a danger to themselves or others. And those would be offenses like burglaries, dealing drugs, violent crimes. The court detains approximately 15 to 20 young people a year directly on probation violations or just serious offenses.
Okay.
But we do pride ourselves in really using every last resort before we detain a young person.
Right. Where's that detain at? Is there a spot in Morgan County? There's not, is there?
There's not. We actually have a contract with the Juvenile Justice Center. It's the Dickinson Center now in Johnson County, formerly known as Johnson County Juvenile Detention Center. And we've been on contract or in a contract with them for about 15 years. They always have 2 bed spots available for us at any time.
Okay. So then they're transported back and forth by the sheriff's department? Or how
Yes.
Okay.
The sheriff's department has a juvenile transport officer that's their designated job.
Okay. And then so they're brought back for the probationary hearings and things
Yes.
to you, or do you go over there?
No, they're brought back for every hearing, and then if they are part of a residential treatment program, then they're brought back and forth by that agency.
Okay. So what's the most challenging or difference that you see in your job from when you started this with juveniles? What's changed? What's taken place?
So the biggest change on how we deal with juvenile offenders or our clients, when I first started, we practically locked up everyone. You committed a crime, you went to juvenile detention, you might spend anywhere from a day to a couple of weeks, but almost everyone was locked up.
Right.
Our focus was always on the punitive end, not so much rehabilitation, although we always had a focus there, but just the nature of how juvenile justice worked is the detention, secure detention was always a go-to if they weren't compliant. The big change is that we're really relational now. So we develop relations with our clients and their parents, and really spend that extra time to get to know them, really strive hard for the rehabilitation process, and we'll go at any length to get them the help they need. We're very reluctant. It's a last resort to recommend detention or removal from the home. So the biggest thing, again, there is that we develop relationships with our clients and their family, and that really gives us the most success. I like the trend we've gone to. Kids don't think like adult criminals do.
Right. Yeah.
We see some kids that, unfortunately, we know are going to be criminals, but we treat them all the same. We try to develop a positive mentoring role model relationship with them and oftentimes their parents.
Well, again, you're listening to the Indiana State Police Roadshow, brought to you by the Indiana State Police Alliance of Cops for Kids. I've got Morgan County Juvenile Intake Officer from the Morgan County Probation Department, Jeff Faudree, with me. We're talking about juvenile probation. So this more of a positive influence on youth, and not just locking them up and saying, hey, you're getting out here in a few days. That's been a positive solution to what you see coming in?
It has been. I've seen a lot more success in working with families. There's a lot more satisfaction. Unfortunately, when we just lock someone up, generally they're not getting the help they need. We target what the justice system considers criminogenic needs.
Okay.
We look at 7 different categories. There are things like substance abuse education, family, peer support networks, and we really target those moderate and high areas of need.
Do you find that you find a lot more cases with the juveniles with drugs?
We do. It's been an upward trend. Unfortunately, marijuana is probably what alcohol has been the last 20 or 30 years with kids. It's just a normal part of life.
Right.
It's been very challenging dealing with drug offenses, especially marijuana, because society accepts the use.
Right.
A lot of people do. Even positive role model people in the community accept marijuana as kind of the norm anymore. So that has been a challenge. There's a lot of aspects of drug use that people do not consider that are detrimental to developing adolescents.
And making bad decisions.
Yes.
Yeah. So what's the most difficult part of your job?
Probably the most difficult part of my job is watching kids throw their lives away. We work hard. We try to give them a positive experience. We give them chance after chance and the tools they need to succeed.
Right.
But when they just throw their hands up and continue down the path that they came in with, it's heartbreaking. I've seen a lot of young people wave to adult court on serious offenses, and they've pretty much, unfortunately, destroyed their lives at that point.
Yeah.
So that's the most heartbreaking portion of the job. A close second is just seeing not all our clients, but about 80% of our clients that come through what they've had to go through, their family lives, normally poverty-stricken. Their parents have normally been in trouble. Alcoholism, drug addiction run heavy in their families. So that's heartbreaking.
So they're following down kind of the same path that they've seen.
They are. It's that generational, if you will, curse that just continues with the family.
Or hopefully you're doing something to help break that, and we appreciate what you do with your job that you do.
Well, thank you.
Well, again, you've been listening to the Indiana State Police Roadshow, brought to you by the Indiana State Police Alliance Cops for Kids. Very interesting show here today with a juvenile intake officer from the Morgan County Probation, Jeff Faudree. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.